I'm Mark Bentham.
And I'm Graham Nichols.
And I'm Katie Holloway. You are listening to Ordinary. Hello.
That was a snappy start.
Good. What we aim for. Snappy.
Straight into it.
And helping Christians live for Christ in everyday life.
Ooh,
I just read off the back
of
my mug because I can never remember precisely what it is. I never know if it's the Christians who are ordinary or if it's the everyday life that's ordinary, but I think it's both, isn't it?
Well, yeah. And we're all ordinary, so
we're pretty
it just
ordinary,
adds to it. So, all of those things.
I have a good friend who I invite along to some things with Affinity, and I invite him along saying this is the ordinary pastor. So we have these various other experts, but he always comes along as the ordinary pastor to give the view of an ordinary pastor.
He's not referring to me just at this point.
No, I have another friend. I've actually got more than one friend, which is
nice. Bonus.
Yeah.
Here we are. Do you want to hear a fun thing that's been in the news? I don't know if it's fun or not. Do you know about the inflation basket?
I do.
Do you know about that, Mark?
Yes, I do.
Every year they put things in and take things out to just kind of track the prices of everyday items. So I think something like a pint of milk is always in there. Is that the idea of it?
Yeah.
Roughly.
Yeah. There are things that have come out. Do you know the things that have come out this...
Rice
coming
cakes?
out is less interesting, but the things that have gone in has been interesting to
Rice
me.
cakes?
Rice cakes have gone in.
Oh, they've gone in. All right, I'd take them out.
Yeah. It really made me laugh because I thought that my household is probably personally responsible for all the things that have gone in. It's like particularly tailored to our household. Do you know what else has gone in?
No.
Have a guess.
Phonographic records. LPs, black
vinyl,
grooved vinyl stuff.
Yeah, that's gone in because that's like trendy now. They're calling it the Taylor Swift effect.
Yeah,
but I don't know if she's personally got that much to do with it. Anything
what
else
has gone in? I don't know anything else that went in.
Make a guess. Make a wild guess, just because it would be fun.
It was something like air fryers, I think.
Yeah, air fryers have gone in. Have you got air fryers, you two?
No, my daughter has, and
your daughter got me onto it. I've got the same one as her.
Yeah, the trouble with air fried chips is not greasy enough, are they?
Depends what chips you get.
Well,
if you buy the really, really cheap chips, they are greasy even in an air fryer. It's delicious.
Okay. All right, good.
At least we're demonstrating how ordinary we are. Just talking about ordinary life and ordinary things.
Absolutely. Air fryers is like the most ordinary conversation you can have.
There we go.
Shall I tell you what else has gone in? Spray oil, but I think that's just because it goes with air fryers. And gluten-free bread has gone in for the first time.
Well, there you go.
It all feels specifically tailored to my household. Out. Do you know what's gone out?
No.
This one is a joy to me. Hand sanitizer's finally out.
Yeah.
Apparently sofa beds are out because people like a different type of sofa bed. Like they're using different
I'm not being funny. That's a whoppingly big basket, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's got a sofa bed in.
Like, how many,
do you know what I mean? Like, how do you carry
these
that
things
around?
every year? Like,
I just go around to the sofa. I just go around. I always think to myself, I must need a sofa bed this time. Yeah.
Do you know what's interesting is how that story cuts through? Thinking about media, like all three of us, to some degree, have kind of a little bit of a connection with that story.
Yeah.
And but you think of all the other stories that are going on, and not all of them cut. Somehow that cuts through. There's something novel about it
Because everybody's got an air fryer.
Yeah.
You know,
well,
there's
not
that
everybody.
thing. No, I know. You can't
Only
go.
1 out of 3.
It's true. That's still a third of this population.
I just haven't got around to getting one. I do want
one.
I have no interest.
I only got one because when you make gluten-free things, it's quite hard to make them crispy. Where the air fryer, you can do it. So, but it's interesting that gluten-free bread was there as well. So, and my family ate a lot of gluten-free bread and a lot of rice cakes. So
yes, I want one so much I may well come around to one of either my daughter or your house and take it. How's that for a segue?
Would you steal it then, Graham?
It took me a minute to realise it was a segue, and I was like, I thought it was fine to go and use Charlie's air fryer, but then I thought it's weird that you're kind of inviting yourself to use mine, but then you said take, and now I understand what you're doing. It's a segue. We made it to the 8th commandment, which is...
Do you think anyone's still listening at this point?
Yes.
Yeah.
Everybody loves chatting about air fryers.
Sure, no, I'm just wondering. No, I mean, to the 8th commandment.
I see. I don't know. We'll find out.
Let us know.
Yeah. Do let us know. Tell you what, if you're listening, send us an email. We'd just like to know. ordinary@cchh.org.uk. Yeah. Graham's nodding. It's right. Eighth commandment says simply, "You shall not steal." Exodus 20:15. So this seems kind of obvious, but maybe before we delve into it, Mark, can you give us a definition of what stealing is? It maybe is maybe more nuanced than we think. Maybe it's not.
I'm not sure I've got any more nuance than don't take stuff. Yeah.
That belongs to somebody else.
Yeah. And I think that stuff could go wider, couldn't it? So it could go reputation. That as well.
Yeah, maybe we can tease some of that out. Don't take things that don't belong to you.
So I think it's to do with belonging. I skimmed a little bit of Leviticus as well, to do with the kind of an expansion, to do with lost property, which kind of intrigued me, or to do with claimed lost property. And obviously in Israel there was possessions and cloaks and sheep, but there was also land.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe no different.
Well, the Westminster Confession says the duties required in the Eighth Commandment are truth, faithfulness, and justice in contracts and commerce.
Yes. Well, indeed, yes.
So, like business dealings as well as your personal, not shoplifting. Yeah, my dad does a lot of metal detecting, and I often wonder, is that stealing? Presumably, if it's a Roman coin that's been there for thousands of years, that's all right. But
possibly, I don't know. There's laws about it, isn't there?
Yeah, there are actually.
But I don't know what in terms of really ancient stuff. I don't know whether it belongs to the state or it belongs to the county council or.
Different things. So my dad's actually had some stuff that he's found that he's donated to museums. So you have to register it with the fines office, but the finder and the landowner usually go 50-50 on anything, which is fun.
I think we're probably getting lost in the detail now, but you get little borderline things where there's sort of lost property and there's no means. It's like, are you stealing if you find? It's the classic. No one has money anymore, so it doesn't matter. But if you had a bit of £20 note on the physical money, I mean, if you had found a £20 note right outside my door here, and there was no means of determining, who dropped it. Yeah. And let's suppose I'd asked all my immediate neighbours and, someone I saw walking a dog once, is that enough? Or do I need to put a notice on the wall out there to say I found £20? Or do I need to, take out an advert at the train station?
We found a £20 once. I took it to the police station, left it with them.
For a £20 note?
They did. But actually, here's the thing. They said to me, you can either keep it, and if someone claims it, you have to pay it back, or you can come back and, can't remember how long it was. So I kept it, and they never got back in touch, and £20.
Yeah. I don't think it would even cross my mind to take it to the police station. If it was like £200, I would, but £20, I don't know. I think I'd just, there we go. Perhaps I might be sitting there. I picked up 20p outside along my road the other day, and afterwards I did feel a bit like, should I have done that? Should I have just left it? Still in my purse, maybe I'll put it back.
It depends where it is and what it is and the circumstances.
I think there are much more obvious cases. There are much more obvious cases where something does belong to somebody else.
Yeah.
And I think that's what the command's mainly targeting, and the other ones around the periphery are sort of wisdom judgments as to quite how far you go to find the potential owner.
Yeah, I think you're right. Does the Bible give us, maybe Graham, you could delve into this a bit, does the Bible give us an indication why this is important? I think the other commandments, it's quite clear why it's important, because it's to do with the value of human life or the value of marriage, and God set these things up. Obviously worshipping God correctly, all of that. But why does the Bible tell us why not stealing things is important?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that came to mind, but you may have in your preparation thought of some more and more better ones. One thing was that, particularly in that culture, possessions were part of your well-being. So they weren't generally luxuries, like you steal someone's car, but they've actually got two others. I'm not saying that's okay, but as a matter of principle, they wouldn't have three cars. They'd have things that were necessary for their well-being or for staying warm or for feeding their family and so forth. So when you're stealing, you're actually depriving another human being of their means of living safely. So I think there's that you're taking away from someone something that they've rightly own in order to provide for their family. I think it occurred to me that just thinking about the glory of God and how God won't give his glory away. I think there is a sort of principle about there are kind of attributes or things that we own, and there is a right to ownership. Of course, in our case, it's not the same as God, where God has the right to own everything. But I think that principle that what is owned shouldn't be stolen, I think applies to human beings made in his image, that what we own can be attributed to us, and it's reasonable to attribute it to us, to give glory to God for giving it to us in the first place. But I think it's reasonable to own it. Those are a couple of things that occurred to me.
I just wonder whether there's a fundamental that goes under those, which actually the premise is, if I'm stealing, I'm not trusting the Lord.
Yeah.
In other words, I'm not trusting the one who I'm in covenant relationship with to provide. It's basically a rejection of him and his goodness, and for me to say, actually, I don't trust you, God, to get this for me or to provide for me, and so therefore I'm going to go and get it for myself. And I think, in all those ways, it just begins to reflect. It's when I'm stealing glory, it's because I want fame that I think I'm entitled to. When I steal from someone, it's because I think I'm entitled to that, and the Lord hasn't given it to me, so I'm going to go and get it this way. And I'm not trusting the means that he has provided, which is, when you think about Ephesians 4, the context is, don't steal, so go and work. And the wider context is, because that's what the Gentiles do, as in unbelievers whose minds are darkened and futile. They have no relationship with the Lord. So I think the context is, and Exodus 20 says that, I've just brought you out. I have provided for you. Here's all you need. Therefore, don't steal. And then you get all the sins that are attached to it, isn't it? It reveals hearts that are discontent. It reveals hearts that are greedy. It reveals hearts that are, seeking, self, and all that.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Do you think gambling is similar? Can we draw similar lines to that? Like, does that fall into the same category? Like, we don't gamble because that's not trusting God.
I think it depends on the motives.
Oh, okay.
So, do you think gambling's okay in some?
Well, I think depends what you mean by gambling. If I go to, if I am, is it a bit of fun where I kind of have strict boundaries? I don't know. You go to the amusement arcades. You never play those. They're a form of gambling.
Yeah.
Go to the horses.
I had this thought the other day when we were at the penny machines with my kids, so they could win a dinosaur keyring. Actually, this is gambling. So what I mean is that you could go to certain events and you could say, well, this is just part of the event. I'm going horses. I'm going to set myself £50, and that's just part of the fun. I'm not trying to gain anything more. It's just part of the event. That's different to, let's say, the lottery, where my intention is I need that because actually what I want is the millions. Now, whether it's stealing or whether it's just a sense of what I'm depending and trusting in the Lord, I'm hoping for something more than I can gain. Mm-hmm. Fun. Maybe we'll do a whole...
that was a big jump.
An episode on that, yeah.
From one-arm bandits, as they used to be called, various slot machines, through to gambling on horses.
Yeah.
Which it's a lot more significant stakes and returns. I think...
Yeah, and there's lots of other issues in that. I mean, that's a simplistic view, as in, there are other reasons for not gambling.
Yeah. Like addiction.
Yeah, so it might lead to addiction. Yeah. It may not be a good witness. It may not.
Yeah, I suppose the principle, I've played with plenty of machines that take amounts of money and pull various levers or press buttons, and it is fun. So I get it in that level. I'm not so much sure it's stealing. I do get the point in terms of the National Lottery that it's not stealing as such, but I think it's exploiting others in the sense that the whole system tends to exploit the poor more than the rich. If you look at the sort of demographic of those who buy tickets. And so you're supporting a system. You're not stealing. If you win £1 million, you're not really stealing £1 million from a whole load of individuals as such. They've chosen to give that money. Yeah. So I don't think it's stealing, but I think there is a degree of exploitation that happens in the system, and you're supporting and propping up that system by gambling. And I think that may well be true for lots of other gambling, including horse gambling. And I think there's a trust of God issue. But yeah, I think it's, I suppose, where I might not, I don't think I've ever bet on horses. We used to have a farm next to a person who bred race horses, so I could have got into it, because I think the whole system is is about earning significant amounts of money for relatively sort of chance events. I mean, some people argue that horse betting is very skillful. So I don't know. Anyway, we've got a little.
But I think that's the thing, isn't it? It goes to the motive. Exactly what, in the sense of if I'm looking to the horses as my provision in the way to make my money, then I think you're ending in a big area.
Yeah. I don't know why else you do it though, really. In the sense of what is the fun? It's the stake. It's the jeopardy, isn't it? So,
sure, but there's a big difference
the chance
between
to wear a hat, maybe
regular. Yeah, exactly. Going to the horses as a part of an event, and in the same way, some people might argue, well, I'll spend 50 quid 30 quid going to the cinema. I'll spend 30 quid, at the horses. As in it's a one-off. It's not like your regular week in, week out. I'm just putting it in a category over there rather than saying,
the
same reason why. One-armed bandits as well. I'm not suggesting for a moment that horse gambling is a ongoing good habit. I
mean, you could argue about the same about school Christmas fairs.
Right.
They come around.
Raffles.
All these things, but you're selling raffle tickets and you end up 30 quid down every time you go to one of these summer fairs, and you end up with a bag of candy floss and some hyper children to show for it. There we go. That's my hobby horse I'm going to get on. I wish we could all just donate 20 quid a year to the school and be done with it.
Agree.
But there we go. That said, I enjoy a World Book Day dress-up day, so I'm a hypocrite, I think. Let's steer this back on course, like a well-trained racehorse. What I guess most of us, probably all of our listeners, are not out there robbing banks, but there are contexts, I guess, where we might think stealing is all right. Like, can we talk about some of those? Maybe Graham, you could start us off. Like, what are some areas where we're more tempted to break this because we just think it's all right?
Yeah, I mean, and my observation of people who become Christians in later life is this is an area, not the bank robbing. I mean, there are some bank robbers who are converted and realise that's wrong, but that kind of marginal area where it's an area for sanctification is to do with not the lost property ones, but to do with, I don't know, not paying for parking tickets, not paying the correct fare for something, not in business dealings, not always being scrupulously honest about the product you're offering or something like that. And I know someone who used to tailgate people at car parks to get in on the same thing, and became a Christian, and to point out to them that was depriving, that was fraudulent, it was depriving someone. But some things when you growing up not a Christian are just kind of instinctive. They're just kind of what everyone does. There are things to do with tax which require judgment as well. So for many of us, it doesn't really matter because the government decides how much. But for someone who's self-employed or a minister of religion, actually, there's lots of things you can claim for, and you have to kind of work out, should I have claimed for that? Shouldn't I have claimed for that? Put a new drive on my house recently, and that is tax deductible. But then I had to figure out, okay, did it extend at all? Because you're, so you have all these kind of intricate rules you have to navigate to work out which bit is tax deductible and which is not. And if you exaggerate, then you're stealing off the government. And then all the other things like stealing time off your employer by not working, or I don't know, bringing home pencils. This is not from my employer, but here's a pencil that I could have stolen earlier. And stationery and stuff. And
I think I've still got a fork in my kitchen that technically belongs to Christchurch, and I don't even go to that church anymore. So I think I've definitely stolen that. Yeah,
no, we can absolve you of that.
I can return
there are other sort of marginal things, like you might print something out at your employer, and it's kind of to the level of acceptability, and you print out 300 copies of something while everyone's out of the office, and that's now stealing.
That feels worse, doesn't it, than just one sheet of paper that cost them 3 pence.
Yeah, well, yeah, and that there are there can be discussions about that, and so yeah,
Yeah.
There's just so many examples, I think, in everyday life. And I think it's not even just people who are from non-Christian backgrounds, but I have observed it particularly in sort of business dealings and people I've dealt with and so on who've perhaps become Christians and then worked out that some of their business practices weren't actually just and fair.
Yeah.
But I think we as Christians get into bad habits sometimes of things we sort of tolerate as that are sort of stealing.
Yeah. And I was thinking probably more like 10 years ago than now, but things like downloading music without paying for it. Like when I was a teenager, that was all you did in your spare time. You'd dial up on that internet, and then half an hour you could have a song that you've downloaded. But that's we don't do that now because we've got streaming services and things, and we don't buy pirated films because it's all on streaming services and stuff. But,
we just get ripped off by various providers to do the same thing. There used to be a thing called LimeWire, didn't there?
I remember it well.
Yeah, but I did download a lot of music or play a lot of music with that because from what I could work out, it was legal because the law hadn't been clarified or something.
Yeah, I think it wasn't necessarily illegal, but it probably was stealing.
But yes, you stole a fork, I stole a few songs.
Yeah, come on, Mark, what have you stolen?
Who knows what
Nothing, he's perfect.
I wish. But I think it's just extending that out, isn't it? In the sense of it's not just the stealing there, how we steal from the Lord.
Tell us more.
Well, as in, do we steal from him the glory that he's due by trying to take it for ourselves? Do we steal, Malachi talks about robbing the tithes. Are we as generous as we could be? As in, some of these things are balanced, and the difficulty in all these ones is the sensitive conscience will feel guilty. They'll hear and start hearing, I need to give more. The hardened, the others will go, oh, well, no, I'm fine. And but it is just before the Lord, just thinking, am I right with him before him on this, and asking ourselves questions, because I think they're kind of categories that we don't often think about.
Yeah.
Are we stealing from him in terms of just how we are in terms of serving? Are we giving what we could do, or are we just kind of take? I think these are areas where it kind of extends outwards.
Yeah. So what might it look like? So to steal God's glory for ourselves, can you give us an example of what that might look like if Joe Christian is seeking glory for himself instead of for God?
I think it's when we talk about ourselves and what we have done and never recognise how the Lord's at work in that. So, a crude definition, would be, crude example would be, you have led someone to know the Lord Jesus, and all you talk about is what a great job you've done, how well you did it, how well you spoke. And there's no acknowledgement that actually this is all of the Lord and his work, and how the Lord has used you. And of course, our hearts are so deceptive, that I can even pretend to be doing that, whilst inwardly I'm still kind of seeking and basking and wanting the glory. So, these that's where it gets complex and harder to see. But I think these, this is the depravity of our hearts is such that the fundamental nature of sin is, in one sense, stealing from what is God that is due. What I'm called to do is wholehearted obedience to him with wholehearted love, and none of us ever do that. So there is a sense we've all broken this.
Can we talk about some of the other things that we can steal, like from God, but maybe from other people as well, that are not necessarily money or items? So Graham mentioned briefly, like stealing time from your employer. Like, what other ways might we steal things, or steal from people that's not money or an item? But also, like, what's the nuance? Like, if I'm stealing from my employer, I'm not employed, but if I were, I used to be, if you used to employ me, if every time I, stop working for a moment, every time I make a cup of tea, is that stealing from the employer? Like, where do we draw the lines for those kinds of things? I think I've just asked you 3 questions all at once. Take your pick.
I think with employment, there's an understanding that in all employment, there is a reasonableness to the fact that we don't work 100% of the time we're employed. Nobody does. Even the top executives that they have a moment, even if it's 5 seconds, where they breathe and don't actually produce anything or think about work. So I think there's a reasonable expectation of work, which is harder to precisely define. Is it 80% of the time that you're productive or something? It's up at the higher percentage level rather than the 20% of the time you do something useful, but it's not at the 100%. So I think to do with employment, I think there's a reasonableness, and I think we know what's reasonable practice, and maybe in some companies there's bad practice, and we probably know that too. We know that a 5-minute conversation with a colleague that's sort of not work and not productive is probably a good thing. An hour conversation, while we're kind of standing outside wherever we work, or where we're just walked away from wherever we're working at home, is unreasonable. If it's just a whole hour of dossing around, and there's somewhere in between, obviously, where it crosses the threshold. I think to do with other things we steal. Mark mentioned reputation. Yeah. We can take clients from people and unreasonably and stuff like that. But I think there is to do with that. I was thinking there's a reasonableness as well about competitiveness and about selling our products and all that kind of thing. And in a sense, every little contract you get, if you're a jobbing builder, if you're a multi-million contractor, you're stealing from someone else in a sense. But the issue is whether the thing you're competing for belongs to anybody first.
Yeah.
You steal points in a way in a tennis game. You don't say you're taking them from someone because they don't own the points. It may seem like it was a lucky point, that came out of nowhere or something, and you might colloquially say you've stolen it, but you haven't.
I guess maybe like cheating in a sport, that probably does cross the line of stealing.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
I hadn't thought of that until you said that. So if you just do it, you get a lucky shot, that's not stealing. But if you, cheat.
Yes.
Do you shoot? I don't know anything about any sports. Do you shoot in tennis?
It is a thing. You don't shoot in tennis, no, but you could cheat in the sense of knowing full well the ball was out or something.
Yeah.
But I mean, you in sport though, you're kind of dependent on the umpires and referees. So I suppose there's willful cheating, like diving in football, where you pretend to be fouled.
Oh yeah, I see him do that a lot. Well, the one match I watched in the last 12 months.
There's sort of cheating in the sense that you do the fouling, and sometimes you do the fouling accidentally, and sometimes you do the fouling on purpose. But I don't know whether that's really cheating or stealing. Anyway, stealing the game is part of the rules You make a calculated risk to break the rules and take the consequences in order to win the game. I don't know.
I think though within that there's a sense that they talk about in terms of gamemanship, and also where you are clearly breaking. So there are some things that are kind of within and is expected within the norms, and there is somewhere you're clearly breaking and then that's where you talk about good gamemanship.
Yeah. So if a Chelsea striker was kind of on for goal, there was only one defender left, and they're powering through, and there's an Arsenal defender, the one defender left. He chooses to hack my Chelsea man down because he knows he might get sent off, but then at least they don't score the goal. Do you think that's good?
But I think but that's where it gets really murky, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I think as in the sense of you're taking, it's like the yellow. Do you take the yellow card, the foul, in order to break up play?
Yeah,
and there's a sense of that falls within the gamemanship that they would, that coaches would instruct you to do. So you could argue, with the last defender, would his coach expect him to do that as part of his contract?
Yeah.
Therefore, he does that, knowing that it breaks the fairness of the rules, but he's doing it within the kind of gamemanship, which is a sense of he's then penalised. It's not underhand. He full well knows it, in the hope that actually it pays off in the sense they don't hit the penalty. That's where it becomes a really grey, murky area.
Yeah. Tell you another one, Katie, which because we're losing you on the sport one, but
because I'm looking a bit glazed.
Plagiarising other people's work.
Yeah.
Either sentences or ideas for books or whole paragraphs and stuff. And I believe that some of the biggest AI engines have basically stolen loads of content.
They have. It's actually, so I used to, before I had my grant from the Arts Council, I picked up lots of just freelance jobs writing little blog posts and stuff. And then I took a year off that to work on my grant project. And then when I came back to it, like ChatGPT and everything had been developed, suddenly no work like that available for writers anymore because AI is doing it.
Right.
It's like changed the whole. But the worst thing is that they are trawling through. So you could say, you could type into it, write a novel in the style of J.K. Rowling, for instance, and it has trawled through all the text of all the Harry Potter books, and it could produce something in her style, which is, I feel like, absolutely stealing.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think even at a technical level, I know at a principled level, I agree with you, but I think at a technical level, a number of the engines, that there's possible legal cases because they're actually grabbing material that's copyright material that shouldn't be used.
Yeah. So, but I think it'll change. I think there's going to be new software developments over the next few years. I think intellectual property hopefully will be a bit more protected. So, got to pay the writers.
Do you know what? I think I don't know how near the end we are, but it's interesting that one of the latest ever converts, maybe the latest ever, but maybe there are others, was the thief on the cross. He was stealing, wasn't he?
Yeah.
So whether it's becoming a Christian or whether it's just acknowledging we've become lax in this area, there's forgiveness for us who steal and us who might recognize years later that we'd stolen and can't do anything about it necessarily, but can come to God with it, and to keep repenting and keep believing and know forgiveness. That's just occurred to me. The thief on the cross.
Well, it is kind of slightly taken in a different direction because I agree absolutely wholeheartedly with Grant says, but it is interesting. Well, no buts. Just it's interesting how this stealing then goes into kind of just thinking about wealth, poverty, nations, how we operate. Who we vote for, are we ethical in how we do things? Are we, in what we buy? Are we actually kind of not giving a fair wage? In other words, these are things that to think about. I don't have the answers of, but I think this is where it extends into this kind of, what we buy, who we buy from, are we stealing from? On one level, you can say, well, it's all fair, they're contracts, but actually we know that that's not necessarily a fair wage. I think it's, as these are the areas where it begins to kind of also root out and explore.
It's complicated, isn't it?
And it is hard, and particularly as a wealthy nation, that on one level that's not our fault. It's not our, we're not responsible for the fact that the Lord has placed us in this country at this time with the situations, the wealth that we have. But we are all then called to think about, okay, but what will that look like to do responsibly? And I can only do my bit. I can't change the whole world. Yeah. But I think sometimes we don't challenge ourselves enough to think. I'm talking to myself as well, really here. We don't think about these things enough. About how this plays out in the wider world as well. What that will look like. Yeah. And that's not to say we should then go and beat ourselves up and live in rags. That's not helpful either. But
it probably ties in quite well to my last question, which is like, how can we motivate ourselves to be obedient in this area? Because sometimes stealing in some ways can feel a bit like a victimless crime in some areas, like some of the things we've talked about, that like, well, is that really stealing? Or it probably is, but nobody's losing out on it. But we do want to be obedient to God. So how can we just in our own hearts, how can we seek to want to be obedient in this way?
Well, I think it starts with the heart of, God loves honest scales. I think that's one of the principles. So I think it's asking ourselves that as those who love the Lord, how does this help me demonstrate that I'm trusting in him and his purposes as one who has been saved, and knowing that the Lord loves honesty and justice and righteousness? Are my actions modeling that in how I deal with people and how I deal with companies? Even in all the little things, so even getting the right change, not that anyone has change these days, but, all those kind of things, or knowing that I've not been charged. Are we those who are saying, actually, you haven't quite charged me for that. Don't forget to add that. Now, super say, well, that's okay. Or, the price isn't wrong and they've rung it up, cheaper than what we know it to be. Mention all these things because the Lord loves that honesty. He loves those scales that are right. Now, I may not always be thinking perfectly, but I think it's driven by that desire of to love God means to reflect Him in how we deal with people.
Yeah, that's a great place to end, I think. So we will see you.
I do just need to clarify. I don't want people thinking gambling is a good thing. I would hate for people to go away thinking it's okay, we can gamble. Mark said it's all right.
Said we should all go to the races.
No, Mark doesn't say that. But I was trying to express that there could be an area where you might extend out.
Yeah, and I think Christians would take different views on that. So I think it was a fine thing to kick around.
But not the horse. We kick the football, not the horse. I know my sports well enough to know that.
Kicking horses, although horses do kick.
Oh, they do, yeah. Okay, let's leave it there. We'll see you next time. You've been listening to Ordinary, the podcast seeking to help ordinary Christians live for Christ in everyday life. If you found this helpful, please do share with a friend. Come and find us on social media. We'd love to have you join our conversations. You can find us on Twitter @OrdinaryCCHH, on Instagram @OfficialOrdinaryPodcast, and on YouTube @OrdPod, that's ORDPOD. Or you can email your comments or questions to ordinary@cchh.org.uk. We'll see you next time.